Okay, I think we're ready to go. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is a very exciting panel because you're going to be hearing from a lot of different lived experience perspectives. And I always think that we have to always include, I work with another organization where they say, not about us without us. Right? So I think it's very, very important to have the voice of the lived experience, whether it's from the individual living with Alzheimer's or dementia, or the carers, or even the system that supports those individuals and those families. So my name is Mary Michael. I am the Vice President of Patient Advocacy and Stakeholder Management at Otsuka America Pharmaceutical, and I am privileged and honored here to be joined by our esteemed panelists. So let me just go down the row, and then when they are ready to present their work and their efforts, then I will allow them to talk a little bit about their background. But first we have Ms. Emily Ong from Dementia Alliance International in Singapore. We have Ms. Christine Le Bourdais from Montreal, Canada, from Alzheimer's Society of Montreal, Canada. Dr. Sarah Cullum from University of Auckland in New Zealand. Ms. Marguerite Keating in the Irish Dementia Working Group, Alzheimer's Society of Ireland, and she is joined by Sean Donnell, as well as Saoirse, right, her companion, and Dr. Mervi Issakainen from University of Eastern Finland in Kuopio, Finland. And we also have Ms. Lynn Flannigan from Healthcare Improvement Scotland. So I think you're going to sort of see a rich tapestry of perspectives of how different cultures, different countries, different families are really supporting their loved ones with dementia. So without further ado, why don't I ask Ms. Emily Ong to join the stage.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning and hello to everybody. This is my first time in London, and so I didn't know that when my first trip to London will have such a big purpose. Yeah. Okay. My name is Emily Ong, and it's an honor to have my abstract accepted for the oral presentations. It means a lot to me because it is about me. It's not about research. It's about finding hope and purpose in life again, and how cognitive rehabilitation has empowered me to live the best that I can each day. I also like to take this opportunity to thank my younger daughter, Joy, who is here right in front, for being here with me, ADI for the bursary, and a very generous Samaritan back in my hometown, Singapore, for making this possible for me to deliver the presentations. Slide 2. Okay. Now, I'm here today representing Dementia Alliance International. In case you don't know Dementia Alliance International, I'm going to do a bit of promotion here before I start my presentation. It's a global registered non-profit organization of, by, and for people living with any type of dementia. So if your countries have anybody living with dementia, please help us to promote Dementia Alliance International. While we might have our difficulties, we continue to strive to provide a unified voice of strength, advocates for the right and dignity of people living with dementia. It's nothing about us without us, and that's why I'm here. Now, who am I? Well, the picture said that I cook a lot. Well, I'm an educator and has been in special education needs for a very long time. And thus, knowledge sharing, accessibility, and inclusion continue to play a major focus in my advocacy work. The difference is that instead of early childhood, now it's dementia. And disability, instead of advocating for, I'm advocating for myself because I'm living with cognitive disability. Now, when I was diagnosed in 2017, there was no support of any kind. And because it is a young onset, so it's hardly heard of back in Singapore. My only experience with dementia was seeing how my late mother-in-law gradually become totally dependent on the family members, and later on not able to recognize own children. And thus, when I was diagnosed with dementia, and there was no hope given to me, but actually taken away from me, my greatest fear is not because dementia has no cure. My greatest fear is that I don't want to feel imprisoned by the environment and not able to do things I enjoy. It is for this reason I started a group on environment and dementia under Dementia Alliance International. We call it the Environmental Design Special Interest Group. So if you are interested, please check it out at Dementia Alliance International. Now, I have many people to thank for helping me to have my life back. And you won't know how difficult it is for the first 2 years when I was diagnosed and I was not given access to any kind of support in Singapore. And I had to fight for my right to receive the local support through Dementia Singapore. And the friends that I have met from Voices for Hope, which is a very unique program, and I think it's the only program in the whole wide world whereby people living with dementia and care partners are trained and developed to become advocates and voice of the people with the lived experience and people who are caring for someone living with dementia. And then, after that, because Voices for Hope advisor is Kat Swaffer, and through that, I get to know about Dementia Alliance International and since being a member. And the peer-to-peer support group where people living with dementia, we provide support for each other. Because no one can understand us better than the people who are actually living with the condition. So their acceptance, and later on, I moved on to my advocacy work, and working with a lot of professionals have helped me to feel that I'm being accepted and included because of the way some of the professionals and the researchers that I work with, they are very inclusive and see me as a person with capability and capacity to contribute. It's a very powerful affirmations of inclusion. And thank you to all of you who are either here or watching it online. Now, I come across the work of Professor Linda Clare on great cognitive rehabilitation, who are trying to find ways to help myself, to maintain my functioning and independence. Now, GREAT stands for Goal-Oriented Cognitive Rehabilitations in Early Stage Alzheimer's and Related Dementia Trial. Now, being an educator in special educational needs, I know the benefit of having a goal and a plan. And just like the individualized educational plan or your IEP in the special needs area, the GREAT CR approach is individualized also. And the goal is set by the person living with dementia and with support if needed. Through my work with my peers living with dementia, I have learned that there are few factors that need to coexist for cognitive rehabilitations at home to work. First, the person living with dementia must realize the need to change the way of doing things due to the change in their ability level and see the intervention in a positive light. Only then the goal is meaningful and provides an intrinsic motivation to persevere, because it cannot be from outside in. It has to be inside out. Next, barriers can be physical or social environment. Like when family members are doubtful of the person with dementia capacity to do things for themselves, they will tend to do everything for the person living with dementia. Or the physical home environment is not accommodative to the current ability level of the person with dementia. For example, I have often heard this case that person living with dementia forgot to turn off tap. I do that. But it doesn't mean that I cannot go and turn on the tap, okay? This issue can be easily resolved by installation of a sensor tap. Don't stop the person living with dementia from washing if they want to help you to wash the utensil or what. That is a purpose in life we need. We cannot be passively sit there and wait to be, take okay because we are not an object. Now, to empower the person with dementia to try new ways of doing things, they need to have information and be taught how. So every one of us are unique and different, and thus what works for one person might not work for another person, even though they might have similar issue. So when things doesn't work out, it shouldn't be perceived as because the person has dementia and is hopeless to teach. Please have a scan around of the environment, and many times you will find that it is the environmental factor that disabled us, and not because we are living with cognitive impairment or dementia. And that is very, while I'm supporting with my peers who are living with dementia, it is also very important for me to understand what strength they still have, what ability they can, how much they can comprehend. And then I will provide, submit suggestions of what are the possible strategy or intervention they can put in place. So if I am a person living with dementia can do that, you as a professional trained with all your professional training, you should be able to do that to help more people. Having an enabling environment and accessibility to assistive technology is critical component to the success of cognitive rehabilitations. It is for this reason that environmental design should be included in any national dementia plan or initiative. So when you do something for people living with dementia, always include the environment. Think about environment, what can be done for the environment. Now, slide 7, I will have a video to show, but before I go on to the video, I'd just like to let you know that this video was made in conjunction of the Enabling Festival Singapore, whereby we try to show that person living with dementia can still do many things. And my goal is to be able to continue to make bread, because it is very important for me to keep this new skill that I learned during the COVID lockdown 2020. And just to let you know, since I'm in London, the one that I learned it from is from, what is the name? Bread Ahead. At the Borough Market, he goes on live, the baker, Matthew, and through that online video, I learned how to make bread. So it doesn't mean that we cannot learn. It's just that it takes a much longer time and more effort for us. But as long as you believe in it, and then it helps us to have that confidence. My family believes that I can do, and they help to get all the things for me, and I learn it. Sometimes I make very hard bread like a stone, but they don't mind, they chew on it, Sometimes I make very nice bread, and then they will tell me, this is very good, please keep this recipe. Yeah, but then it doesn't mean that I don't have barriers. My greatest barriers are my poor sense of time, so that is why my daughter is timing now, because I tend to talk over time, and 10 minutes means nothing to me. Sequential tasks and accuracy in measurement. So, hello, video please. Okay, now let's have a look at all the things that we need for making this bread. And you can notice that I have all the things nicely lined up already, because I need to have a visual view of all the things that I need to have. Not only just the ingredient, but also the measuring equipment. As you can see, all the measuring equipments are placed next to the ingredient. Certain ingredients that I tend to make mistake, I'm very careful. Like for example, salt. If I put too much salt, the whole bread will be too salty, which I quite often do. So I come across this one. This is a digital spoon whereby I can measure a very small amount of the salt. So then I can just put the salt here and I measure, and that is for sure that I won't make the mistake. Yeah, and then after that, all this measuring spoon, It's just I place it next to the item so that I know this spoon is for this, because it is very hard for me to refer to and fro to my recipe, and then I will get it very confused afterward. So normally before I start, I will look at my recipe, I gather all my ingredients, and then after that I gather all the measuring equipment also, put it next to the item. So, and then you can see that there is the egg timer again. This time is the mother hen is coming out for me to do, because when we do our folding technique is every half an hour, half hourly. So I will need the timer to assist me. And then you need a baking tray, a baking tray for making your focaccia bread. Yeah. So yeah, I forgot to mention that a weighing scale also, and then a weighing scale, and then you just need a big bowl, not a simple bowl. Thank you for your support, technical support. Yeah. So I making focaccia bread is my forte. Why? Because I'm motivated to learn how to make focaccia. It's my favorite type of bread. And it's very expensive in Singapore, by the way. So now I can make all kinds of focaccia bread, and then I bring it and share with the people who attend the Voices for Hope program. So they get to eat and they get to learn that it's life, and then we sing song. So as you can see from, I forgot to click. Okay. Now, as you can see from the video, the assistive technology that I use is very cheap, right? It is easily available. And the kitchen timer is a very important thing for me, because like what I say, I'm not good with my time. So that is where my daughter Joy put that very important pottery. Yes. Yeah. So in my home is that I have lots of kitchen timer, and now I'm no longer able to associate the sound with whatever that I measure. So I had to put the kitchen timer next to whatever that I'm measuring. So you can see that how many kitchen timer I will need. Yeah. So then, so it doesn't cost much to make that intervention, to put in place, to enable person with dementia to work towards their goal, to maintain the functioning, autonomy, and independence. It is scalable, very important, okay? So when you come up with an intervention, you make sure that everybody living with dementia can access it, because you have to think about people who don't have the economic means to have big, expensive technology. So whatever thing that you come up with intervention, it has to be something that is very basic, that no one is left behind to have a chance to be enabled. So then the other thing is that to do these cognitive rehabilitations, the person needs to have someone that is trained, like what I shared earlier, to have the know-how, how to do it, what are the methods, backward chaining, forward chaining, all this spacing to give us the what you call to remember what are the things that I need to do. So these cannot expect the person living with dementia or the family members to become a genius in cognitive rehabilitations. This is what therapies come in. But it doesn't mean that we need to constantly have therapies. We can still do it, but we need the support. Next, having a good quality of life means being able to do things for oneself. And often this aspect of maintaining daily life functionings is much overlooked and not provided for in comparison to cognitive stimulation activities. Well, I know cognitive stimulation activities like bingo, coloring, you can name it. It is easily available at all the dementia center. But one thing, you must not forget that every day when we wake up, we are just like you. We need to have a purpose. We need to know that I can make a cup of drink for myself or for my family members, can take a train or bus to somewhere that I like, and I no need to be imprisoned by my own home environment. So when I can make the bread and cook a simple meal for my family, I feel so good about myself that I can still be an active, contributing member of the family. I used to cook 3 dishes, 1 soup, and plus 1 dessert. Now, my family has to bear with me. 2 dishes takes 2 hours to cook. But it doesn't mean that I stop cooking. I still love cooking. In fact, every night after the conference, I cook. We stay in an apartment, a studio apartment. My daughter took me to Sainsbury. What else?
All of them, actually.
All kinds of supermarket, you name it, okay? I will go there and buy the local ingredient and see what we have in the supermarket, and then I bring back and I cook. Yeah. So that way, I feel that even when I'm away from home, I still maintain my routine, that my purpose, that I'm still a chef, no matter where I am. So my parting message for all of you is that always remember to support people living with dementia to have a sense of hope and purpose, because that is very important. No matter what you do, this is the first one that you must always know. When things doesn't work out, put on your scanner eyes and look at the environmental factors and not the person with dementia. Assistive technology changes our life. As you can see, if you have been following the report that have been released by the global disability thing, that is a great enabler for us living with cognitive disability. My phone is my best friend, So I always tell my friends who are living with dementia, make sure you charge your phone fully charged every day before you go to sleep, so that when you go out, you always have your phone with you. It is our best buddy. So with this, thank you very much, and do support us at Dementia Alliance International. Thank you.
Emily, that is so inspiring. First of all, I can barely boil water. And, I have a minor in chemistry, and this is why I didn't have a major in chemistry. So I'm very impressed with the bread making. But I think that what you've shared with us is what I've heard a lot of people, especially the younger generation, saying that they're hacking Alzheimer's or hacking a disease so that it's no longer adapting to the environment, but having the environment adapt to you and to your needs and your support. And so I love the message about look around and see what can be adapted. I love the sensor tap that you were talking about, because we have so much technology at our fingertips anymore that, to not tap into, no pun intended, to not tap into that is really, it's such a missed opportunity.
Yes.
And it sounds like you've got incredible purpose for a lot of various things. I think we've got a new YouTube star, right? I would watch her making bread. I would watch that, and I would still mess it up. So
it's okay.
Yeah. But anyhow, thank you so much. Next, we have Ms. Le Bourdais from Montreal, Canada, and looking forward to that presentation.
Thank you very much. Hi. Okay, here we go. Hi, I'm Marie-Christine Le Bourdais. I'm from the Alzheimer Society of Montreal, where I'm the Director of Programs and Services. It has been almost 3 years since I've spoke in person, so why not join an international conference in London for the first time? I'm really, really happy to be here, and I want to thank ADI for this great opportunity. And I also want to thank the delegates for this shared opportunity of learning, and it was really a rich experience for both my colleagues and I. So it's an honor, I'm sorry. It's an honor for me to be here on the behalf of my team also that is devoted to making truthful and significant connections with the persons or the people living with Alzheimer's they accompany each day. Oh, that was the slide I was supposed to talk to. Okay, here we go. So our mission at the Alzheimer's Society of Montreal is to alleviate the personal and social consequences of Alzheimer's disease through the development and delivery of leading-edge intervention care and support services in Montreal. So let's just take a few moments to come back to what person-centered approach is, and I think Emily had done a good example of telling us what it is. So as you already know, it's greatly inspired by Tom Kitwood, and this approach grew in many definitions and applications, depending on the models, discipline, and organization that has implemented it. At the Alzheimer Society of Montreal, this approach is at the very heart of all our programs and services and is reflected in each of our interactions with our clients, the caregivers, care partners, or people living with Alzheimer's disease. Every team member is also trained to this approach. The elements to remember for us and for me to this approach is what constitute the basis of most models, which are personhood, relationship, uniqueness, and embodiment. Every day, we recognize each person as an individual, deserving dignity and respect. We presume the person's competency. We acknowledge the person's right to autonomy and self-determination. We take into account the person's personality, life experiences, support systems, and ways of coping. We understand and believe that people with Alzheimer's disease are capable of learning and adjusting to their illnesses and living meaningful lives, and this all throughout their journey. Oh, it's a long transition. Okay, so I will be discussing today two of our various services that concretely demonstrate how we apply the approach to the development of what we offer to people living with dementia as an experience, which are individual psychosocial support and virtual art therapy sessions. Our individual psychosocial support is at the moment the only service of that kind in Quebec, Canada. Right now, programs and services in Quebec for people living with dementia are often oriented towards occupational therapy, years after their diagnosis, and psychosocial support is mostly dedicated to caregivers. Now, this is great, don't get me wrong, but we want to fill in the gap and make sure to help people that need it and offer them a safe space to talk about the diagnosis when it's announced. Topics that are frequently discussed in this service is, for example, what are the stages of the disease, what to expect next, how to help maintain cognitive health as long as possible, what resources are available in the community, and also emotions, of course, such as anger, guilt, fear, anxiety, hope, and happiness. This service is offered by a counselor whose profile and academic background is usually social work, occupational therapy, special care counseling, psychology, or gerontology, just like me. And this person essentially shares values and attitudes of empathy and compassion. We want to build a trusting relationship, a safe space to discuss in confidentiality outside of the healthcare system context. First thing is to assess the person's need for the needs of the person living with dementia to determine if it's the right service for the person, as we have a variety of programs to offer. That's why also there are some criteria, which you can see on the screen now. At the moment, we are helping 30 to 40 people with the services, and we give almost 200 hours of direct intervention per year. Generally, the counselor goes to the person's home because most of our clients still live at home, but the consultation can also be done in our offices. So the key is really flexibility for us. During the pandemic, especially the confinement periods, we had 5 confinement periods in Quebec. Each person was contacted weekly to maintain the connection, break isolation, and support the building relationships. In the context where there's a lot of awareness is done on the importance of an early diagnosis, we're pretty sure this service will continue to grow and evolve. I just want to, okay, it's okay. If you want to have the reference of this diapo, you can come and see me right after. It's a very interesting book. So, how to move from one way of thinking to another has inspired the services and our approach in general. We want the person to feel valid and important during the support, thus increasing their self-esteem, allowing them to adapt to the diagnosis and be able and comfortable to address more difficult issues thanks to the trusting relationship established. So on the left side, when a diagnosis is announced, there is often loss of self-esteem and confidence, making it harder for the person living with dementia to discuss the difficulties they're experiencing and might withdraw from social contact and or feel interpersonal tension. What we want to do is increase their ability to live the experience of dementia by first reassuring the person living with it that they are valued. So it increases their self-esteem, confidence, and help reduce social isolation, as you can see on the screen right now. A quote from one of our clients that use the services. It has been few years since I've been diagnosed with major neurocognitive disorder. The doctor warned me, neither you nor I know how the disease will progress. I came to accept this disease and told myself that if it gotten worse or if I got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I would stop trying and just let myself live as simply as possible. The first time I met the counselor, he listened to me and with a lot of empathy. From that moment on, I changed my outlook for the future in the same way. It was better to focus on the efforts I had to make to keep my remaining lucidity as long as possible. So what I'm hearing from this person is they needed to feel empowered. So we gave this person some tools, some tips, and a space to discuss it and help this person maintain their cognitive health. We gave this person a hand on this situation. So our other example today of person-centered service is our art therapy for people living with Alzheimer's. Our workshops allows people living with Alzheimer's to engage in a project, exercise their autonomy, and experience positive emotions. The workshop gives meaning to the present moment and preserves the dignity of the person. It's non-directive, supports validation of the person's experience, subjective experience and emotional experience, and it focuses on their abilities. We adapted our services as much as possible. I guess every organization had to do it during the pandemic. So we offered one-on-one virtual meetings. We sent personalized kits at home so that we can maintain the art therapy sessions. Pre-pandemic, all our therapy workshops were in group settings. People living with dementia would gather, feel connected with each other, and recognize themselves through others. And each year, participants would present their project to our members in the community at our annual vernissage. In 2021, we wanted something special, and in the context of confinement, we wondered how to do it. So the team brainstormed together and with the participants in the co-creation of our vernissage video. The theme of the vernissage is a village to stay connected, because that's what we wanted and needed to do. Stay connected while not physically together. Create a village to feel and stay supported. In this video that we're going to start in a second, you will visit each participant's house where their artwork is featured. We also called out the community to participate in the creation of the village by sending us their own creations at home. You can start the video, please.
Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Anne-Laurence Mongrain et je suis art thérapeute. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue à la Société Alzheimer de Montréal, un lieu où on accompagne et supporte les gens atteints de troubles neurocognitifs et leurs proches aidants. Aujourd'hui, je vous invite dans notre univers. L'an dernier, en mars 2020, une pandémie nous est tombée dessus. Vous connaissez l'histoire, vous l'avez vécue, vous aussi. On a dû fermer nos portes, chaque employé a dû travailler de la maison. On a aussi dû repenser tous nos services. Pour l'art-thérapie, on a commencé à offrir des services d'art-thérapie en ligne, d'abord en individuel, puis on a commencé à faire un petit groupe. Cette année, pour le vernissage annuel de la Société Alzheimer de Montréal, on vous présente quelque chose d'un peu différent. On vous invite à découvrir un village où on a rassemblé des œuvres faites par nos participants en art-thérapie durant la dernière année, mais aussi créées par des gens de nos réseaux sociaux et par nos employés. Aujourd'hui, je vous présente notre village, une communauté où, malgré la distance physique, on est resté connectés.
Somebody looks at.
Thank you. Okay, so yes, we visit every person's house. The last one you saw is called, the person is called Jürgen. He's now a famous artist in our community, and he's selling his pieces. In various moments he did that, but he was not an artist before his diagnosis, so he really discovered a new part of himself. Participants really enjoyed the process, the result, and their experience. And when we showed this video at our annual General Assembly, we could really see, it was online, we could really see the proudness in their faces with their families seeing the artwork that they co-created through this video. So we can hear them a little throughout the sessions at the end of the video. If you can put the 11:20 mark, please.
So it's a good way of, say, expressing yourself at any given time. Next thing you know, you're smiling. Makes you feel good when somebody looks at your art and they really say, well, that really, it's good, it's nice, it's calming. You have to think of others more than yourself.
C'est une expérience, enfin, c'est un apprentissage nouveau. C'est comme si c'est apprendre à écrire. Et le crayon, ben, il y en a plusieurs. Des couleurs, tout ça. Non, c'est un apprentissage.
Je me sens en joie, je me sens joyeux. Oui, ça fait du bien. Ouais. Surtout être en groupe, comme ça, là. Surtout là, dans ce temps-ci, on ne voit pas grand monde, hein.
Est arrivé, c'est fini de la tyrannie, les enfants, la 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 la. Je crois que c'est la Marseillaise. Je suis pas sûre.
C'est bon.
Ah, oui, merci de nous avoir chanté ça.
Thank you. So we've heard it a lot in the last 2 days, but I think it's really important to remember how person-centered approach can and will improve quality of life, experience of care, connections, confidence, and empowerment. And what I really like you to remember is those 4 key words: personhood, relationship, uniqueness, and embodiment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. I think that those 4 words are very important for, a theme to kind of carry us throughout this whole journey, if you will, the shared experience. So thank you for sharing that with us. I know that the Van Gogh immersive experience is something that goes to a lot of towns, but this is a very unique way to stay connected and to highlight, individuality and their self-expression, and really giving individuals an outlet to be creative and showcase their work and stay connected in a different way. Again, love the creativity with all of these different ways of staying connected and allowing people to express themselves. So next we have Dr. Sarah Cullum from the University of Auckland. I think this is going to be a very interesting presentation to look at, maybe a population that we're not as familiar with, which is the Maori from your area. And so it's going to be interesting to see what you found was, from, I guess, your observational studies.
Yeah, thank you. So, tēnā koutou katoa, which is greetings in the Māori language in New Zealand. So I'm going to talk to you today about the Pacific Island and Māori experience of dementia. First of all, you might wonder what a POM, because I actually come from southeast London originally, is doing talking about Māori and Pacific Islanders in New Zealand. So I do come from the UK, and I've got a clinical background, so I'm an old age psychiatrist, and I've also got a dementia epidemiology background. I worked in Cambridge with Carol Brain, and I've used some of that knowledge to present some data today. So in 2016, I moved to New Zealand, and I started working in County's Manukau Memory Service, which is a Middlemore hospital, and it's in South Auckland, which is one of the most deprived areas of New Zealand and very diverse. So 50% of the population is non-European. I worked in the memory service, and one of the first things I noticed was that Māori and Pacific Islanders seemed to present at a younger age. So being an epidemiologist, I went to look at the literature and see what I could find. I couldn't find anything. There's never been a dementia prevalence study in New Zealand, so there's very little information. In 2017, I moved over to the University of Auckland into a senior lecturer post. And so I already had a portfolio of research. This is what I was going to do. This was my background. This was the opportunity. So just a little bit about Aotearoa, New Zealand. It is a Pacific island, or 2 Pacific islands actually, the North Island and the South Island. It is a bicultural country, so Māori is the indigenous population, 17% of the population, originating from Polynesia originally. 7% of the population are Pacific Islanders, so from Samoa, Tonga, Cook Islands, Niue, and in fact more Pacific Islanders live in New Zealand now than live in the Pacific Islands. And I think 2/3 of the population are now born there. We have a very fast-growing Asian population, and in New Zealand, Asian means Chinese and Indian mostly, 17%, so equal to the indigenous population. And then the remainder is 59% European population, the colonizers. So the non-European population tend to be very socioeconomically deprived. They've got a high burden of chronic disease, poor health outcomes, and actually have been described, New Zealand's been described as having low and middle income populations in a high income country. And I think this is the same for dementia, and I'm hopefully demonstrate that to you. So this slide, you know, and I just put it up really to reiterate that we know that dementia is going to triple by 2050, more so in low and middle income countries, and that's because of the changing, the demographic aging, so there's going to be more older people. The cost of care was estimated at 1 trillion. I think that's going up fast. Most of the care, of course, in low and middle income countries is unpaid care provided by family carers. And again, I'm going to demonstrate that this could be the same in New Zealand. So demographic aging is happening in New Zealand as well. So the only line that's going up there is the 65 plus, the red line. The rest of them are going down or stable. And there are ethnic differences between the growth in the over 65 population. So between 2011 and 2026, it was estimated there would be a 50% increase in European over 65s, but a doubling of Māori and Pacific, and a tripling of Asian over 65 population. But of course, the services have been developed for European populations, so there's nothing really available, and this is certainly what we've seen in the memory service. So the dementia prevalence is rising too, in line with the demographic aging, and you can see on this graph that the non-light green bars are the Māori, Pacific, and Asian populations. But I have to say, this is not real data, it's estimates. We have a report that's produced every 4 years called the Dementia Economic Impact Report, which is produced by Deloitte, which you could probably guess by the image on the front of it, but we won't go there. What they've found is, so they take Australian data, where there has been some dementia prevalence studies, and apply it to our population projections. They found that the total cost of dementia care was estimated to be 1.7 billion New Zealand dollars, that's about $1 billion US dollars in 2016. Half of the cost is aged residential care. New Zealand has more aged residential care beds than any other OECD country, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. They didn't present any findings by ethnicity in the last report, which is something that we've addressed. So apart from the demographic aging in non-European populations, we would expect changes across ethnic groups. So this graph at the top here shows that Māori and Pacific Islanders present up to 10 years younger with a first onset of stroke. So 1 in 3 Māori with stroke are under 65 when they present first. The second graph shows obesity prevalence is much higher for Māori and Pacific. And the third graph is diabetes. By the age of 75, Pacific Islanders and Indian populations, 50% have diabetes. So there are differences in the modifiable risk factors, and if anyone was in here before, Jill Livingston actually put up our graph showing how the modifiable risk factors are actually much higher for Māori and Pacific, which is good news because they're modifiable. So we haven't got any of these data in dementia, so we decided to go back to our data from the county's memory service, which is in a very diverse area, and use our local data to see whether we could find anything, as there's no national data. The population that we cover, so this is, on the left is New Zealand, so you've got North Island, which is the warm bit, and South Island, which is where you go skiing. And in the top of North Island is Auckland, and south of Auckland is counties, Manukau. Often people call it South Auckland. And that's divided into 4 areas. The green area is mostly rural, and we don't cover that. The other 3 areas we do cover, and they have mostly Māori, Pacific, and Asian populations. So this table is just to show that our population is very different. So the New Zealand European population, for example, is 31% in our district, compared to 59% nationally. So, our data. The first thing we found was, as we suspected, Māori and Pacific people present much younger. Māori up to 8 years younger than New Zealand Europeans. Pacific is 5 years younger, but they actually present at a much later stage. So it's probably about 8 years younger for the similarity of stage. Māori and Pacific are less likely to live alone, particularly Pacific Islanders. They tend to live in multi-generational households, and it's the culture to look after your older people. Comorbidity index is higher, as expected, so there's more hypertension, obesity, diabetes, etc. So that was kind of gratifying because it shows what we expected. We then linked the data to mortality data, which comes through to the hospital from the Ministry of Health. And we found, unsurprisingly, that mortality is higher in older age, more severe dementia, lower cognitive score. But we found that Māori and Pacific people with dementia live longer. Now, this is partly because they present at a younger age, but the fact is they do have more years lived with dementia. We then looked at placement in residential care, and again, risk was higher in older age, more severe dementia, lower cognitive score. But we found that New Zealand Europeans were 3 times more likely to use aged residential care compared to Māori and Pacific. Again, we weren't surprised because whenever it's recommended, families just say, no thanks, we'll look after our own. But if they're doing that, the burden is on the family, especially the economic burden, because these are socioeconomically deprived families. It's often younger people in the family who give up education or give up their job to do the caring. So it's got an impact beyond the person living with dementia. So we decided to look at whether people looking after their older person with dementia get extra home-based support services. So this, we looked at aged residential care, but the bottom 2 rows shows that although we expected Māori and Pacific families to get more home-based support, they actually got less. Although those that did got many more hours per person than the Europeans. So we suspect these are the people with really severe dementia who are getting a lot of support. We don't know who they are because it's de-identified data, but it's something that we need to look at. We had a quick look at the national cost data to see whether that showed the same thing. And sure enough, what it showed, and we had some data for Asian populations as well, because we didn't have enough in our local area. And we looked at aged residential care, that's the top line, and found, sure enough, that Europeans have more spend than Māori and Pacific, and Asian have half the spend per person with dementia than New Zealand European. And it is slightly compensated for Māori and Pacific with home-based support services, but not for Asian. So they get less residential care, less home-based support service, and in fact the total spend for Asians is half of what it is for New Zealand Europeans. So you could say there is, and just this Dementia Economic Impact Report, we're quite proud of this, because Alzheimer's New Zealand put out a bid and we got the bid, so we feel that we've done a better job, because we've presented unpaid care, the cost of unpaid care, and the cost of the differences across ethnic groups. So in conclusion, we've got Māori, Pacific and Asian peoples with dementia using less aged residential care but not receiving community support, compensatory community support at home. They possibly have better outcomes. We haven't got enough data on that, but our feeling is that people do have better outcomes, and that's probably because they are being cared for in their family environment at home. But there may be poorer outcomes for carers, particularly economic. And what we need to do is do some more in-depth studies, some more qualitative work around what is actually needed and wanted as culturally safe alternatives for aged residential care and home-based support services. It's quite difficult because we actually have to train up bilingual, bicultural interviewers to do that and to interpret. You know, the qualitative research needs to be interpreted by somebody who speaks the language. But we're doing it. The other thing is, I would say we actually need to shift the culture in New Zealand. We do tend to funnel people into aged residential care very easily. We don't provide alternatives for people wanting to live at home, and I would like to see that change in my time there. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Cullum. I think that's a great example of, you know, going to individuals where they live, and it would be interesting to see if there is an interest in, you know, looking at technology and how that could maybe prolong the time before an individual has to go into aging residential care. So I think that would be kind of an interesting thing to look at, because we also have an Indigenous population in the United States, and I'm not quite sure we've done justice in looking at, you know, what that would look like in those communities, and very many similarities, but thank you very much. So next we're going to have another individual present to us, and I think that Kevin was here to actually share his perspective from a carer, and living with Alzheimer's. And so Sean's going to go first, and then we'll have Marguerite coming in. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm here to speak on behalf of Kevin Quaid. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it this morning, and I'm very privileged to be able to speak Kevin's words when he asked me to do so. I've known Kevin for a long time online, and even though we're living very close together, this is my first time meeting him over here, and I suppose I'm just been inspired by meeting with Kevin and everybody here, Marguerite as well, and I just want to thank everybody for such a great opportunity. And I'm just going to read the words that Kevin has written. So I probably do not have the same delivery style as Kevin, as many of you know Kevin, and he's very dynamic, but I'll do my very, very best. Hi, my name is Kevin Quaid, and I have Lewy body dementia. I am chair of the Irish Dementia Working Group, and for the past 2 years I have been vice chair of the European Working Group of people with dementia. I am here today with Marguerite, one of my colleagues from the working group, and also with Saoirse, who supports us all in our advocacy work. She is like the mammy of the group, and I can attest to that as well. We're here today to tell you a bit about ourselves and our top tips for staying well and being given a diagnosis of a disease that's both progressive and incurable. I was first diagnosed with Parkinson's about 5 years ago, and then shortly after with Lewy body dementia. I am 58 and would be classed as having a younger onset dementia. After I was diagnosed, both me and my wife and I did not know what had hit us, or what had happened, but at least we had finally got a proper diagnosis of what was wrong with me. It took months to settle in and to ask for help, but with the help of my new family, as I like to call them, the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland, as well as Alzheimer's Europe, they helped me to dig deep and find that inner passion, that inner belief that everyone has. Today, I am the author of 2 books, Lewy Body Dementia Survival and Me, as well as I Am Kevin, Not Lewy, as well as writing for 3 newspapers. You see, I found that hidden talent that we all have, and I didn't even know that I had it. And mine is a love of writing. My life has become my advocacy. My life has become my advocacy work, and I keep meeting wonderful new people like everyone here today. Kevin's top tips. Number 1 is to try to keep your brain as active as possible. It might be a hobby, it might be going for a walk, it might be listening to music. Just find that one thing that you love to do or always wanted to do. For me, it was joining the Irish Dementia Working Group, which led me to joining the Alzheimer Europe Working Group. Another of my top tips while being a member of the working group is, in order for our voices to be heard, we need to be working in an environment where everyone is equal. Always ensuring there's a shared power and shared decision making. That everyone's voice is listened to and everyone's opinion matters. Advocacy work is extremely important work and work we really enjoy, but there is also a social element to it. And I can attest to that as well from meeting Kevin this weekend. Staying social is so important for your mental well-being. So make sure to stay social. If you'd like to join a local organisation, meet with friends for a coffee or a drink, and most importantly of all, keep talking to all your supporters and your family, but especially your friends. We all have that one special friend who we should talk to. I will now hand you over to Marguerite, the wonderful Marguerite, who has become, I can say now, a friend as well. So, Marguerite, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sean Donnell. My name is Marguerite Keating. I'm 59, from Cashel, a proud Tipperary woman. I was brought up in Adelaide, in Australia, hence the Gammy accent. I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's on Valentine's Day in 2019. Got no flowers. I felt totally isolated and frightened, devastated, and even suicidal. But the red-headed gene in me fought back, and I made a decision that day to live every day as well as I can. I picked up the phone and I rang the dementia advisor in my area. I joined the ASI working group, and gradually I became more confident. It has given me a purpose, a focus, and a raised passion in me to speak for people living with dementia, as not all of us can speak up for ourselves. My top tips are: keep it simple. Don't sweat the small things. Keep a routine. By using a whiteboard and my diary, it keeps me focused. Keep it in the day. If I stay in today's business, there's less chance of me feeling anxious about the future and what it may bring. Keep it local. Be an advocate. We all need community. I can't fix everyone with dementia, but by working with my local supports, I can stay in tune with what's going on locally and be a support to my local memory cafe, local dementia champions. After all, charity begins at home. Keep it light. Doom and gloom doesn't work for me. A smile, a laugh lightens the head, and keep it honest. Be aware that others may not know what's going on with me. If I'm worried, tired, stressed, or confused, I need to be honest and let others know so that they can help me. Keep busy. I love my grandchildren's company, and I love my art. I love my partner and the people around me that help me to keep going. And lastly, and most importantly, keep going. Thank you. Ganjo Saoirse.
Hi, everybody. Oh, I forgot I wasn't talking through that. Sorry. Hi, everybody. I'm Saoirse Kelly. I'm the Advocacy, Engagement and Participation Officer with the Alzheimer Society of Ireland. My role means I have the great privilege and pleasure of supporting the Irish Dementia Working Group. For those of you that don't know, the Irish Dementia Working Group is a group of people all living with dementia who advocate tirelessly to improve services, supports and policies in Ireland. They're an extremely busy group of people and their work is endless. Just to give you a taste of some of what they do, they sit on a variety of advisory groups and steering groups nationally. They lobby government and politicians. They participate in education and training, so they're always talking to the future doctors, nurses, social workers and healthcare professionals in Ireland. They influence the internal workings of the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland, so like recruitment. So one of the members actually sat on the interview panel for my position there recently. So I always thank her that I can pay my mortgage as she gave me a job. They attend conferences nationally and internationally, just like here today. So what are my top tips for working and supporting a working group? You may notice that the slides behind us have no words. Is this because we were too lazy and couldn't be bothered? You've now met Marguerite. You've heard Kevin's words. Lazy and quiet are not really two words that come to mind. Basically, there are no words behind me because if you are reading something behind me, you're not actively listening to me, to us. We are all human. We all get easily distracted, and God knows that happens to me a lot these days. So if you are lucky enough to work with people living with dementia, make sure you are always listening. Listening builds trust and respect, and we all deserve trust and respect. And if people have committed their time and energy to improve the lives of others living with dementia, well then the least they deserve is to be listened to. Actively listening is not just listening to what has been heard, it is actually listening to what has not been heard too. Everybody's voice matters, every voice counts, and it is my role within this group to make sure everybody is represented. So, my next tip, ask the expert. So, usually when I'm doing a presentation, it comes naturally of what I'm going to say to people. This time it didn't. I struggled. This time last week, I didn't know what I was going to say. Marguerite and Kevin were way ahead of me, but that's usually the case anyway. The only thing I am an expert on is being Saoirse Kelly, and even some days I get that wrong. So ask the experts, Marguerite and Kevin. They are the experts. People living with dementia are the experts. We all in this room share the common goal of wanting to improve lives of those living with dementia. So we need to ask the Marguerites and Kevins of this world. So on that note, I'm going to take my own advice, stop talking, and pass you back to the expert. Marguerite, would you like to give your expertise to the room again, please?
Thank you. Thanks, Saoirse. I probably wouldn't be here today only for Saoirse and the ASI, because they give me an awful lot of support. I'm not really able to do everything as easy as other people, and I do get a lot of support. So I actually, on the outside, you wouldn't even notice that I have dementia most of the time. Marguerite's top tips. 1, keep it simple. 2, stay in the present. 3, keep it local. 4, keep it light. 5, keep it honest. 6, keep busy. And 7, keep going. Right.
Thank you very much. My goodness, I think we're seeing a theme when we hear from our esteemed panelists with experience, and that is autonomy, right? Independence, autonomy, having a sense of purpose. So I think it's wonderful that advocacy has become a new purpose, but that comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes, as well as with different passions with the artwork that Christine also shared with us. So thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Mervi from Finland to share some observations that she's seen.
Hi, I'm Mervi Issakainen. I'm a social psychologist and working as a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Eastern Finland. And I will present our findings on different kinds of resources and impediments for influencing one's own life when living with younger onset dementia. Our study is conducted in Finland, and it is a part of two research projects, one Finnish project and one international project, in which we have explored what happens when a person develops dementia or MCI while still working. I have followed others' presentations and realized that I really need to start using more photos and tables and get rid of these boring slides. But previous studies and lived experiences have addressed the important role of a sense of agency in living well with dementia. And written legislation and regulations also established the importance of respecting a person's autonomy. We conducted an interdisciplinary, in other words, socio-legal study, combining social, psychological, and legal viewpoints to explore how working-age people seek to influence their lives and what makes it easier or more difficult for them in their everyday life. The results were published last autumn in Aging in Society. We drew theoretical insights for the study from the concept of relational autonomy, and in doing so we understood agents' ability to influence one's life as shaped in co-action with other people, as well as in interaction with the wider social context, such as material conditions, meaning, for example, access to information and services, and discursive conditions, such as prevailing norms and discourses. Access to participation can also be seen as an important part of having opportunities to influence one's own life. For example, from the perspective of human rights, the concept of participation highlights the inclusion and non-discrimination and equality, and thereby how people living with dementia have the right to participate in society and making decisions that concern their lives. We conducted 3 focus group discussions with 12 participants who had developed dementia while still working. They all were retired at the time of participating in the study. And they all took part in groups organized by the Alzheimer Society of Finland, so they already knew each other before we went there to discuss with them. And to address our aim, we attempted to create a reciprocal interaction between social, psychological, and legal viewpoints throughout the research process, from data collection to the analysis and when writing the results. We found that there were different kinds of impediments for handling challenges at work and related consequences with dignity, such as lack of support and seeing challenges at first as signs of the employee's incompetence, laziness, or, for example, alcoholism, rather than cognitive impairment. Thus, some also reported being treated unfairly and disbelieved, and delays in getting the diagnosis. Because of the challenges in managing one's work, most of the participants thought that the best thing for them was to retire right after or quite soon after receiving the diagnosis. However, some also brought up not being heard when making decisions about what is the right time to retire. In these cases, there were no discussion about these things. It was more of a self-evident thing that a person will retire. But whether the person continues working or stops working, the other citation here shows the importance of having the opportunity to influence the course of events. All the time we only sat in different kinds of meetings, and then the doctor said that now you leave. And then I was like, will you give me 1 week mercy? So access to healthcare and medical investigations, as well as being heard in decision making regarding work, are key resources which enable the person to handle the challenges at work and related consequences with dignity. And so is emotional and practical support from colleagues and supervisor. However, as can be seen from this citation, asking and receiving help may not be an easy thing for a person who has earlier managed their work independently and well. Our participants also described their life after receiving the diagnosis and leaving employment, losing an important part of one's daily life, daily routines and social contacts from the workplace. It could be problematic from the point of view of living a fulfilling life. Gaps in one's relational safety net and in receiving adequate and timely guidance and counseling. Experiencing challenges in moving from place to place, and also discomfort and fears related to losing one's autonomy, limited some participants' opportunities to live well. The discussion between Virpi, Outi and Jaana here exemplifies that coping with this situation requires different kinds of psychological and social and material resources. Thus, new and meaningful activities and social connections, along with loved ones' presence and support, as well as access to services, for example, high-quality guidance and counseling, was very important for the participants. Some also addressed the importance of anticipating future by conducting legal planning with continuing powers of attorney or an advanced healthcare directive. And others in turn preferred that their loved ones take care of their affairs. But once again, at the center of all this was having possibilities to influence the decisions and choices that affect one's life. Because of the stigma associated with disability, some participants disclosed the shame and losing one's value when stopping work. And some also described the kind of enacted stigma by telling how other people had started avoiding them and vanished from their lives. And here Laura and Ayla described the loss of value by commenting that people living with dementia are thrown in the trash can. Therefore, all three groups highlighted the need to question and fight the stigma. They also gave some advice to people who face a similar situation, that it is important to continue life despite the changes and acknowledge one's life as valuable as it is. So positive thinking, along with everyone's efforts, were addressed as key resources for fighting the stigma associated with younger onset dementia. To conclude, challenges related to work, to everyday life in general, and to position in society reported by our participants reveal gaps and obstacles that impede the full realization of the rights of people living with younger onset dementia. Therefore, there is an urgent and compelling need for workplace education. for different stakeholders, among others, about science of cognitive impairment in general and the legal rights of people living with younger onset dementia. Equal and ongoing access to guidance and counseling for younger people who live with dementia, and an effort by society as a whole to eradicate stigma are also crucial. And here we need raising awareness, as we have heard in this conference many times. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mervi. You know, I think that your observations and your conclusions are so important because we do have, I think, workplace policies that help carers, but maybe not individuals who are starting to uncover their diagnosis. So I think that's a very, very important message. The last point about eradicating stigma, I feel as though ADI is really creating a platform to do that. You know, elevating the voices of individuals living with, as well as those of us who surround them. Together, we're eradicating the stigma. So I feel as though there's been a lot of advance in that space, more so lately than before. So I do want to remind our audience that we will be taking some questions at the end. We're going to have our last panelist, Lynn Flannigan, up here. But please think about questions that you may have for any of the panelists. And also for those watching from a virtual platform, please feel free to type in your questions, and then we will start to go through those at the end of the last presentation. So without further ado, Lynn.
Thank you, Mary. Wow, what hard acts to follow. Some wonderful presentations this morning. I'd just like to thank ADI for this opportunity. I'm absolutely delighted to be here today to share some of the work that we are doing in Scotland. My name's Lynn Flannigan. I am a Senior Improvement Advisor in the Focus on Dementia team, which is part of Healthcare Improvement Scotland. Our role is to support the implementation of Scotland's dementia strategies, and I'm here today to talk to you about our work looking to support a more coordinated approach to post-diagnostic support. So why are we doing that? Scotland's third National Dementia Strategy was published in 2017, and it committed to deliver a more flexible, coordinated, person-centred approach to supporting people with dementia from diagnosis through to end of life, building on the existing one-year guaranteed post-diagnostic support which was already in place. Clearly, as we've heard, we know that many younger people are diagnosed with dementia. However, around 60% of people newly diagnosed with dementia and referred for post-diagnostic support are actually 80 plus, so many people do have other comorbid conditions. We also know that many people are not being diagnosed until the moderate to advanced stages of the condition, and we know that this has been exacerbated further by the pandemic. Our analysis of one post-diagnostic support caseload demonstrated that 65% of people were already frail, and 76% of people were already known to older people services. So clearly, many people would benefit from a more coordinated approach for their care and support rather than post-diagnostic support being delivered in isolation. So what do we mean by care coordination? It's a term that means different things to different people. It's relatively broad and ill-defined. This definition here is the World Health Organization definition, which I really like. As part of this work, we were on a journey to really understand what is care coordination, what are the practices associated with that, and what are the outcomes for individuals with dementia and their carers in health and social care. So we conducted a literature review and produced an evidence summary and a webinar, which can be found on our web pages. Needless to say, the evidence is showing that effective care coordination can lead to positive outcomes for people living with dementia and their carers, and there's benefits to health and social care. And you can see some of the benefits there. It's also very clear from the evidence that poor coordination can lead to duplication, variation, fragmented care, and poorer outcomes for people with dementia and their carers, such as things like avoidable hospital admissions. We also wanted to ascertain whether there was a Scottish example of where this was working well. So there was one health and social care partnership that were regarded as an exemplar for providing good coordinated care for people with dementia and their carers. So we conducted an appreciative inquiry and a data analysis of their health and social care data to understand further what is their approach and what does this actually mean. So we found that people with dementia, not surprisingly, have support needs which result in higher health and social care resource use than people without dementia, and that's not surprising given the nature of the condition. However, the overall costs for people with dementia in Midlothian were significantly lower than the other partnerships in that area. And a lot of that was around acute bed day following unplanned admission. So clearly this is positive in terms of cost, but much more importantly, this means there are a reduction in the risks for people from unnecessary time spent in hospital. People with dementia in this area were significantly less likely to die in hospital, and they were much more likely to have received a diagnosis and also be known to services, so they were less likely to fall through the gaps than perhaps in other areas. So from this work, we extrapolated 12 critical success factors for care coordination and have since developed a self-assessment that can be used by services and by organisations. All of the information from this work, the reports, the critical success factors, the self-assessment, and an animation about the critical success factors can be found on our web pages. So very briefly, what are they? So at that micro level, at people level, a single point of access for people is crucial so that people don't have to navigate a complex health and social care system. Support from diagnosis all the way through to end of life, and not just for that year. Promoting people's independence and quality of life, maximising community connections and building resilience in people. Support that's person-centred, outcomes-based, responsive and appropriate to individuals' needs. And proactive referral to things like rehabilitation and reablement. The needs of carers should also be identified and met. Carers should be seen as equal partners in care. Carers should be offered carer support and also have their own carer support plan if appropriate. There should also be opportunities for self-referral when things start to change. People often find it really, really difficult to re-engage with support when things start to change. So perhaps written information on how to get back in touch, or perhaps some person-centred mechanisms to keep connected, such as telephone or digital means, and we've heard some of that already today. At that meso level, at that team service level, some sort of mechanism in place for multidisciplinary, multi-agency sharing of collective expertise, case review, triage of new referrals to make sure people get the right support at the right time by the right service. So, for example, weekly team meetings. Also, this is a surprisingly big one, that roles and contribution valued. It's amazing how many services don't actually know what other services do in their area. So that might result in a lost opportunity for people to get support, but also can mean that people are batted back and forth between services. So organisations and team members should know and value each other's role and contribution, and roles should be clearly defined. Enhanced dementia knowledge and skills. All staff should be trained or working towards an enhanced level of dementia knowledge and skills. In Scotland, we have the Promoting Excellence framework to support this. There should also be a sustainable framework in place for ongoing staff education and training. People need the right knowledge and skills to support people. And also the use of quality improvement. Services should always be looking to improve, and also there should be routine use of quality improvement methodology and data collection to best understand your population of people to support planning and commissioning. And lastly, at that macro level, at that organisational level, there should be two-way flow of information at all levels. People living with dementia and carers should be empowered to make decisions as well as being well informed. And there should be robust communication processes in place between services and key stakeholders. So, for example, GP practices, who often can be quite far removed from dementia services. Third sector contribution. The third sector should be valued as an equal partner in terms of their contribution and commissioning, and not just seen as an add-on. And third sector partners should be at all relevant operational and decision-making tables. Leadership at all levels, it can be difficult to find out what that is, but what we found was that was about staff being empowered to make and suggest changes, and a respectful culture that's inclusive and quality driven. Staff wellbeing and development should be valued. So this care coordination does have to happen at that people, service and organisational level. People with dementia and their carers their needs should be looked at holistically, for example, an 8-pillar model of care coordination. And dementia needs to be seen as an organisational priority in strategy and commissioning. We wanted to know if these critical success factors were transferable to another context, so we actually took the learning from this work and used it as a framework in another health and social care partnership in Scotland as part of a Scottish Government Commission programme of work. This piece of work is concluded and is being externally evaluated at the moment, and a report from that work will be available later in the year. But you'll find lots of learning and outputs from this work on our web pages. But needless to say, we did find that those 12 critical success factors are actually a really, really good, useful framework to ensure a coordinated approach. And that piece of work featured on the slide has provided us with greater assurance that those critical success factors are actually the right things to look at. And when they're not there, it's really evident that they're not there. And when they're there, it's really evident when they are in a system. So now that we have greater certainty about these 12 critical success factors and other high impact changes across the whole pathway from diagnosis to end of life, we will now look to spread this work across Scotland as part of a new commission that will look at collaborative methodology approach. We've got lots of other learning from the 5-pillar model of post-diagnostic support, the testing of the 8-pillar model of care coordination, and also the testing of the advanced dementia practice model that we've just recently done as part of the commission that I just mentioned. We also developed a quality improvement framework for post-diagnostic support that we're spreading across Scotland as well, which again you can find on our web pages. That was very much a whistle-stop tour of just some of our work. You'll find all of the information of all of our pieces of work on our web pages. But if you'd like to get in touch or follow our work, please contact us directly or follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Wow, Lynn, that's really comprehensive work. It's interesting because I've led a coalition in the Alzheimer's dementia space and Alzheimer's disease space, and I will tell you that we were looking at other disease categories about care coordination, and of course oncology is one of the big areas that really has this down pat from a roadmap standpoint, and it looks like you've done your similar kind of templating in the Alzheimer's space, because in oncology it's rhythmic almost, right? How the individual is put through all the different touch points and with all the different, therapists or clinicians or, whatever it might be to really manage their care in an optimal setting. And it has made such a difference, right? And it's been very person-centric. I know in a lot of institutions that the oncology patients, they go through like writing, courses to be cathartic and kind of express their feelings, or art. So it's very similar. And I'm wondering if healthcare systems or governments are already poised that way in oncology, why couldn't they adapt it to the Alzheimer's space? So it's just a challenge. It's an observation based on your findings. So now we're at the point where we can ask some questions of our panelists. So we started with bread making as a new outlet of creativity and We talked about also the role of art and how we stay connected through COVID and then sharing that with the community. We looked at the Maori. I apologize because I was calling the Maori. That's probably an American pronunciation. And then we heard from 2 individuals living with, Lewy body dementia as well as with early onset, as well as looking at the Finnish study to look at some of the conclusions from a organizational standpoint and how we can support individuals who get early onset. And then Lynn talked about the system. So let's talk about any questions that you may have for any of our panelists. And if we have any online, would be happy to entertain those. Any questions? So, Emily, I actually have a question for you.
Okay.
Because, when you received the diagnosis, I think that people, when they receive a diagnosis of a chronic condition, they can do one of many things, right? You kind of leaned into it, as we say. You leaned into your condition. You said, no, I'm not going to keep this down. So what was the inspiration for you in terms of saying, how can I manage my life so that I can keep autonomous and independent and have some passion and some purpose in my life?
Well, I guess it makes a lot of difference because I come from the working with disability. And when you work with people with disability, you never say there is no hope. You always find an alternative way. So when I found that what I'm having, because I'm not so much on the memory, my one is more on executive and attention span. So then I found that it's very similar to those children that I work with and the learners. If I can tell them that there is hope, there is alternative, so why can't I do it on myself? So that is how, I pick myself up and I use the same strategy that I would have made for other people who are learners with disability to apply on myself.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. Marguerite, you gave us some wonderful tips, right? And I think you also have a very similar approach to your diagnosis. The very last one is, what was the last one?
Keep going.
Keep going, right? Keep going. And I just love, that was very similar to the animation that we saw, Emily, in your presentation with the figure that's wearing a cape, which I think exemplifies a lot of heroes here on the stage. So Marguerite, what was your inspiration to keep going and to really move forward in this journey of yours?
I suppose for me, the day that I was diagnosed, I really hit a rock bottom and I felt very low and very lonely, and my daughter at home was only 15, and I felt that how am I going to, one, expect her to mind me, which is totally out of the question. My 2 older daughters, one has 6 children, imagine that, and the other girl lives right at the top of the country in Donegal. So, she's 6 hours from me. And both of them wanted me to come and live with them. And my 15-year-old wanted to run away. She wanted to, go and live with other members of the family. So I felt straight away, that I didn't have the right to be a burden to them. And I thought that, maybe the other option, the more sinister option, was the kindest thing to them. And it had nothing to do at that day about how I felt about myself. It was how my disease was going to impact on them. And if I was going to become virtually of no use to them, what was my point of being here? So like all the speakers have said over the last few days, the most important thing is to feel valued and to feel of use. So I say my red-haired kicked in, the redhead gene kicked in and said, no, sod this. I'm going to fight as best I can. And because the people around me, other people around me, you know, when you say you have Alzheimer's, people, they're what do you call it? The way they, I can't think of the word, but when I told people that I had Alzheimer's, some people said, oh, I'm really sorry, you know, and other people cried, you know, so I can't think of the word, but their response to me upset me. So I thought there's other people, and I met people, and they said, I'm embarrassed, and I don't want to be a part of this because I'm not of any use. So one of the most important things about any illness, about anything, about alcoholism, addiction, cancers, any kind of illness, we don't want to feel people that are totally taken over by something out of their control. They need to feel some control. And the only thing I can control in a daily basis is my attitude. I can't control my illness, but I can sit back and let everyone take over. That's not me. You know, or I can fight for the people. Lovely people that I've met that are not as strong as me, or not as feisty as me, you know? And like the people I met from Australia, like Natalie yesterday, you know, and it really touched me, because her and her daughter are fighting their corner over that side of the world. And you've got Emily, who's very similar to me. I've never met her before, but we're similar because our bond is we need to be heard and we need to make it. So when I'm not here in 15 or 20 years' time, I need to have that ground, sort of, some bit of carpet down for the Marguerites and the Emilys and the Natalies that are coming on after us. So they don't have to go through the hardship. So that Kevin, people behind Kevin coming through, doesn't have to go with being wrongly diagnosed or me thrown out of my job. In one day I was told, stop driving, give up your job and get your affairs in order. At 55. That's disgusting. And people, we need to band together and make sure that people coming behind us don't have to. And we've supports behind us that we don't have to use them.
Right. Wow, those are... Thank you so much for sharing your candid and authentic self, and to Emily and to Kevin through Sean. I know we're running out of time, so I'm just going to close this session, but what an inspirational discussion and a lot of great work. And I can tell you just from my perspective that individuals like yourself, Marguerite, Emily, Kevin, you are paving the ground and trailblazing so that it will be a softer landing for others who are, following in your footsteps. And look, I mean, you're an inspiration regardless of what the condition is. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the meeting.
How beauteous is mankind, O brave new world that has such people in it.